All right, hello everybody. Oh, I got some static. Um, how's everybody doing today? Hoping everybody's doing good. I want to thank Mike Wilson and the AIA East Bay chapter for allowing us to connect and talk about some questions that you guys have about working remotely and technology aspects of working remotely. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start our presentation now. Now I want to basically, I am gonna have something to present, but I'd like it to be more of a discussion as opposed to just me talking, because I really hate talking to myself, and it kind of feels like it when you're doing one of these. So if you guys have any questions, just feel free to throw them into the chat window. If you don't mind putting 3 question marks in front of the question, so that kind of denotes that it's a question, makes it easier for myself to understand and look for questions that way. Um, Again, you can do some additional things. So I got a question here that says one person can hear. Is that a problem for everybody? Can you guys just put in the chat? Yes, can hear. Okay, good. All right, awesome. So great, thank you guys. Okay, so moving on, and Steve, maybe you can adjust your speakers, improve the put volume up on the speakers. Yeah, hopefully that resolves the issue for you. All right, so moving on, I mean, the purpose for today's presentation is basically for us to learn the following 3 things. We're going to take a look at your home technology setup and what is, the basics that you need to work remotely from home. We're also going to take a look at some tools that architecture firms currently use to collaborate outside of the office, either with the internal team, consultants, and also on the client side. And also we'll look at some cybersecurity risks that have came up as we transition to working remotely, and look at how we can mitigate some of those cybersecurity risks. So the first, I want to try and just gauge what are some issues that you guys may be experiencing with remote work, and what are some questions that you have. So we're gonna do a poll question here and try to find out what is the major technology challenge for you when working remotely. So please choose any, whether it's issues with file access to projects, performance issues, or just security concerns. And if you choose other, if you want to specify, that would be great. If not, then it's fine. But you can put the question in chat window as well.
Okay, we've got a couple more seconds left to vote, so get in there if you can. We're on about only 50% of you shared.
Okay, so we got some additional comments in terms of using Vectorworks. Good.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Okay, so it looks like slow performance is by far the biggest winner here. Also project file access and some increased security concerns as well. So we are going to cover all of these. If you, again, ask any questions you have, and then if you feel that we may not answer your question, we can always then take it offline and talk more about it. So as we move on, we're going to take a look first at what the home internet setup looks like. And here's some additional things. I think we covered all of these: file access, low performance, and increased security risks. So on the home setup, so what do we need to actually work effectively remotely? Well, in reality, all we need is two things from the tactical standpoint. One is a very good internet connection, and second is a desktop or laptop computer that allows us to perform remote work. And we'll cover the internet portion first, and then as we go through the presentation, we'll be able to also look at what type of, depending on the remote access solution, what type of desktop or laptop we can use. So traditionally, prior to the last couple months, but I mean, for the last 20 years, let's say, your home internet connection has been a circuit that has what's called a shared bandwidth circuit. So it's not a dedicated circuit. It basically means that you're sharing your bandwidth with everybody who lives in your neighborhood. And by neighborhood, it could be, a couple of blocks, or it could be a small town, depending on who your internet provider is. Usually, the home internet circuit is designed for streaming because that's what we've been doing mostly for the last 10 years, is trying to either download content from the internet or look at videos, or download music, and also do some PC gaming. So one of the questions I got is whether it's the same for the internet that's hardwired into home. Yeah, your internet provider is the one who designs this. So they would basically design it for these type of scenarios, right? So, if you're using Comcast, if you're using AT&T, Sonic, for the most part, this is how they design the back end of the network. So as we move forward to the next slide, we want to talk about what is actually required to work more effectively from home. And in order for us to be able to communicate effectively with other people, and also to move files back and forth from our office to our home, we need to basically have an internet connection that has a lot of upload bandwidth. Also is using a medium that's a low delay. And what that means is when you send the signal, it takes a very short time for it to get to its location. And that is either a fiber circuit, a cable circuit is okay. A DSL circuit is really not a low delay medium. So if you have fiber or cable, you're much better off working remotely. And then you would love to have a dedicated circuit. And there's some options now that are available, but most of them are still going through the shared. So if you have like Comcast cable, if you have AT&T DSL, unless it's a fiber, which is a synchronous fiber, like a Sonic fiber, it will not be a dedicated circuit.
Boris, did you want to launch that poll to find out what kind of connectivity people have?
Yes, please. So let's just, I'd like to find out what you guys are using at home.
Mostly
Okay,
cable.
looks like we got a pretty good gauge, mostly cable, and I'm assuming that's Comcast. And then we have a few DSL. And for other, I'm wondering if it's a wireless setup.
Maybe the others could pop their answer into the chat.
Yep. All right, well, we're gonna close that poll. And yeah, so we have a Wi-Fi, wireless setup. I'm assuming it's either through one of the wireless service providers like AT&T, Verizon, or somebody like that. All right, awesome. So let's move on. So again, if you're using Comcast cable, and which it seems like a lot of you are, you want to make sure that you, and I'll give you some more information there, but you want to make sure that your circuit, is at least 5 megabits upload. Hopefully you can talk to Comcast and see if you can, pay some additional fees, but get this up to 10 megabits, which may make things better for you. It's just a suggestion. I mean, in my area, 5 megabits is all I get, unfortunately. But if you have that option, it's worth paying us a fee to increase that. Okay, so now that we've kind of covered what would be a good circuit to have, let's take a look at some of the ways we can improve things at home. Now, a lot of us use wireless because it's easy to use, and that's what our internet service provider puts into our home, right? They give us a router. We don't have to do anything. It's basically plug and play. You get your password and your network name, and you just connect your computer wirelessly. So some of the things that we can do to actually improve the performance of that service and that router is to at least restart your router maybe once a week, just to make sure that it starts off fresh and the performance stays up to what it's supposed to be. Because I mean, most of those devices are really not designed to, again, provide a lot of upload speed and performance, so restarting them may help. The next option would be to actually call your service provider and see if you can upgrade the router, because you are leasing the router from them, but they don't always reach out to you and say, hey, your router is 4 years old. We have a brand new one that we can upgrade. So calling your service provider and saying that maybe you could have an upgrade would be another good option, which will allow for better performance of the internet home. Now, one thing I do want to point out, especially, well, if you're on AT&T or Comcast, I don't know if you've seen in your house the free Xfinity Wi-Fi or the free AT&T Wi-Fi when you search for wireless, but it's usually there. So this is the one I was getting from my neighbor. And basically, Xfinity and AT&T shares your wireless connection out to the public as their free public Wi-Fi. So if somebody connects to it, they don't get access to your internal network, but they do use your bandwidth and they can start streaming, which will affect your bandwidth as well. So what I do at my house and what I recommend is I actually don't use the wireless from the router that the service provider gives me. I purchase another separate router and use that as my wireless, right? So this way I disable the wireless piece on the router so that the public Wi-Fi is no longer available. And when you actually call AT&T or Comcast, they tell you that they don't do this, but as you can see from the screenshot, they do. And then lastly, the best way to improve performance would be to use a wired connection. And I know not everybody's set up for it, but this will eliminate a lot of the problems that we have with wireless, including a lot of interference, dropped signal, and other things to that effect. Let's see, there's another question. Yeah, so that's a good point. Internet providers are backed up, so it's not always easy to get service right now. All we can do is try to get some of these things in place with them, but yeah, sometimes it takes a long time for them to get back, especially nowadays. How do you disable Xfinity Wi-Fi? So you can log in to your router, and there will be an option to get it disabled. As I mentioned, you do need to have another Wi-Fi device if you plan to use Wi-Fi in your house. So if you have another router, then yeah, feel free to log into the Xfinity device. I think they give you an IP address and the username and a password, and then you can disable it. If you want more details on that, if you send me an email, I can give you instructions. And I'll have my contact information later in the presentation, so you guys can reach out with any additional questions. All right. Would you advise upgrading the modem also, or is the router the biggest issue? Right. So the Xfinity device is especially the new ones, is all in one, right? It's the modem and the router. If you have separately the modem and a router, again, you'd want the service provider to upgrade both, because usually the modem is the one that kind of is the first line of providing you service, and then the router is the next device in. So if you had them for a while, they're probably both could benefit from the upgrade. Any other questions on this and optimizing your home setup? Okay, I'm gonna move on to restart the modem and the router. Yeah, if you have two separate devices, this would apply to both of them. Yeah, definitely a good point. Buying one is less expensive than renting, but also when you buy one, you're responsible for support. So if something happens to that modem, and they can prove that it's the modem's fault, if somebody comes out to your house, you're going to pay for that visit. So yes, it's cheaper, but at the same time, there's more risk associated with that. So it's up to you guys if you want to buy one or rent one. I would suggest renting one because it's not that much. All right, so moving on. Now let's take a look at the tools that you guys use in your firms and in your office. And I know we had a poll question about this already. But basically, I just want to look at the technology stack first to then transition into how we can access those things remotely. And initially, the first category of tools that are being used is professional tools. And those are all the tools that you use to deliver your service, from CAD tools, BIM tools, any drafting tools. So things like Revit, things like AutoCAD, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, various plugins like Enscape, Lumion to do rendering, and Bluebeam, Adobe. So any of those tools that you use to deliver your services are in that category. The next section is communication tools, and the biggest communication tool of all is email, obviously, but then additional tools like video conferencing, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and others. And then there's collaboration tools such as BIM 360 and BIM Cloud that help us collaborate with either internal teams or external consultants. And the last category is operations tools, and these are all the tools that we use to run the business, whether it's project management, practice management software like BQE Core or Delta, payroll software, accounting software and sales and marketing software is all part of this stack. So I know we've talked about, we had a poll of tools. So we have that information. I think most of you were using Revit for as the primary professional tool, and a few others in there as well. So we'll talk about all these in the next slides when we talk about how to access stuff remotely. Okay, so remote access method. So how do we access all of these tools we just talked about? There's really two ways. One is a secure way. Well, actually three ways, but it's either secure way or unsecure way. And the unsecure way would be to, well, I'm just gonna open up everything on my office network to the internet. That way I can access it easily, right? Well, what that means that everybody else on the internet can access it, so that may not be the best solution for you. And although I think everybody here kind of understands that, I did have a few people, last month or so reach out to me with questions, and that's kind of what they were advised to do, is open up a lot of their stuff to the internet, which is not a great thing. So I definitely told them that there's got to be other ways to do the things they're looking to do. So then the two secure methods that we have is VPN, and that's called, it's a virtual private network. It basically means that your computer connects to your office and becomes a part of its network. So a question about Sonic, I'm going to say no, but I think I need more detail exactly what, what that meant. So we'll talk about that some more. So going back to the VPN, virtual private network means that your computer is virtually on your network. So once you connect to your VPN endpoint, usually a firewall in your office, you create a secure tunnel to where you can securely transmit data back and forth. And then the second method is remote control, and that's where you don't transmit all the data. You're remotely controlling a machine in the office, just sending your mouse clicks and your keyboard keystrokes, and then you're getting your video output back to your computer. So we'll take a look at both of those. First, we'll take a look at how VPN works and answer any questions you may have about that. So here's a quick schematic diagram of the VPN. You can see basically this is your office network. You have a file server and some computers on it, printer and a plotter, and your firewall. So in a VPN scenario, your remote computer will connect to the firewall to establish the VPN tunnel, and then you're basically sending full sets of data back and forth. So if you're opening a file from the server, that whole file gets transferred over back through the internet to your computer and gets open on your computer. So you can imagine sometimes larger Revit models or even larger CAD files with a lot of links may take a long time to open in this scenario. So this, the benefits of the VPN is that your computer is fully virtually, but fully on your network, so you can access all the resources on your network, and that the data is encrypted, so you're pretty secure. There's some additional security concerns with VPN if you're using your home computer to access it and you don't have all the security provisions that your work computer may have. So if your kid was playing video games or going to doing some research or doing some schoolwork or doing some other stuff on your computer, you don't know if there's any security risk that he put on there, and those can easily get transferred to your office network. And also performance, as I talked about, this is probably the biggest one with the VPN, is because it relies on having a good connection in the office and also a very good connection at home in order to transfer to do that full transfer of files with a good performance. So if either one of those connections, either one at home or the one in the office, is not so good, you'll see performance issues with VPN, and it may not be the best choice for you. So any questions on the VPN? All right, so I'm gonna move on to the remote control mechanism. And so in context of this, we can also talk, remote control can also be used on top of the VPN, and we can look at, we'll see that in the next slide. But basically, the way remote control works is that you are accessing a computer in your office and controlling that computer. So you're always sending inputs to your office computer, and then the computer only sends back what you see on the screen. So it's not full files being transferred, it's just a little bit of data, mouse clicks, keyboard keystrokes, and video output that's getting sent back. Everything that happens in terms of file access between the file server just happens between the file server and the local computer on the local network. So your performance does not suffer in that case. Some benefits of remote control. So you can, even though you may not have the greatest internet connection or have some issues with bandwidth on your home computer, you can still use remote control and still have the high performance that it provides. Also, when properly configured, it is more secure than a VPN because, again, your computer does not become a part of the network. It just sends keyboard keystrokes and mouse clicks. So if you have a bad file on your home computer, it will not transfer to your office network. Now, some of the cons are you need two computers, right? So you need a computer in the office and you need a computer at home. Now, your computer at home does not need to be as powerful as the one in the office, and you can even use, tablet computers, iPads, and even mobile devices to control your office computer if you can see on the screen. But you do require to have two devices, one to be in the office, and it must be kept on at all times, right? So if the computer in the office is shut off, you wouldn't be able to access it remotely. So if there was a power outage in the office, you may lose remote access, and you have to come into the office to power the computer back on. All right, so using LogMeIn for remote access. So we'll cover some of the additional providers in the next slide. So that's a good point. So there are two groups of remote control solutions. One is the native remote control, which is Microsoft RDP or Apple Remote Desktop. I think Microsoft RDP is the most popular one right now because they also allow you to configure it so you can access it from the outside properly and securely. Apple Remote Desktop is most used, could be used over VPN, or also when you're just trying to remote control something on the local network. And there are also third-party providers like TeamViewer, Google Remote Desktop, GoToMyPC, VNC, Splashtop, LogMeIn, and those are services that you need to have an agent running on your office computer in order to have access. Now, also most of these outside of Google Remote Desktop is paid services for business, right? So if you're if you're just using it for personal use, you may get a free license, but once you start using it for business, that free license really doesn't allow you to do that. So there's some cost associated with the third-party providers. Usually it's around $25 to $50 a month, depending on the plan. So you can see how that kind of adds up. If you have, it works pretty good for smaller firms, but if you have a firm, 6, 7 people or more, that those monthly costs become substantial. So As far as Log Me In goes, I've had clients use Log Me In with good success. I've also had some complaints, as you're mentioning. You may want to take a look at possibly go to My PC. Again, there's a lot of other factors, including your internet connectivity, that may play into this. But I think there's an additional consideration there is that right now everybody's trying to use one of these services, and they just may not be able to scale properly. So I would suggest signing up with maybe another provider for a trial, and kind of just see if the performance improves, and then maybe switching to that if it does. You can also try to use Google Remote Desktop, which is free, doesn't have a lot of features, like especially a lot of these may or may not support dual monitors. I think that's the biggest feature that many architects and engineers look for, right? Because you want to have as much space as you can when you're drafting or modeling. Again, my suggestion for you would be to try out any one of these other providers and see if that improves performance there. Okay. Any other questions on remote desktop? Okay, so I guess there was another poll question asking about remote access mechanisms you guys use. So Mike, can you throw that up?
So go ahead and close now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and close. So it looks like most of you are using VPN. Some of you are using just a remote control. And then if you're using both, which is good, better than just straight up VPN, I think. For other, what are you guys using? If you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. All right, so I have another question here that says, mobile hotspot, a good backup option. Good backup option for home internet? Definitely. So, having any type of backup option, in my opinion, is good to have. Most of us rely on just a single internet connection in our home. So if you have a backup, or don't mind using your mobile phone as a hotspot in case you lose internet connectivity, yeah, that's great. Obviously, the performance may not be as good depending on your signal, but with 4G and 5G available soon, or even in many areas now, that's it's definitely a good thing to have. Are online backup services like Code 42 secure? It all depends on the plan. So we use online backup for many of our clients. Well, we use online backup for all of our clients, and we use a couple of different services. One, for more corporate clients, we use Microsoft Azure to replicate the data. But for our smaller customers that may not have a server and just have, their desktops and laptops, we use a service that's similar to Code42. It's called Druva. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're on a plan that, I don't know if they offer a free plan or not, but as long as you're not on a free plan, let's put it that way, because usually the free plans don't give you all the options and all the security that a paid plan would. I mean, it's similar to Google. I'll have to do a little more research on that particular one. I mean, I know what Code42 is, and but I don't know that particular Joule plan. So yeah, I can do a little more research and get back to you just to make sure that you're give you peace of mind on that. Any other questions so far? Okay, using Backblaze. Yeah, that's pretty good too. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. Again, we have to look at in more detail at exactly what you're doing and what process you follow for access and backup. I mean, there's also things when we're talking about backup, there's other things to consider. Obviously, security is a big thing, but how often you back up and how far back you can recover, also important. All right. I'm going to move on to the next slide, and I just want to talk about some collaboration and communication tools that you guys may be using or heard of or think about using. So on a collaboration side, we have BIM 360 that allows, if you're in Autodesk universe, allows you to collaborate by sharing Revit models and other files with clients and your consultants. We also have BIM Cloud, which is an Archicad product for Archicad, which kind of does similar thing, allows you to share out the models and access them externally. We have Bluebeam Studio, where you can store your Bluebeam documents and share PDFs and work on them and collaborate on them in real time. And then we have other tools like Dropbox, OneDrive, and G Drive, which allows us to upload files, mostly documents and PDFs, and then collaborate in real time on them as well. And then on communication side, we have tools like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Slack, Google Hangouts, Skype, and there's probably many, many more that I'm not putting here, but these are the most common that we see with our clients and also other people we talk to. So we'll cover some of these in more detail in a few next slides, and just go from there. So quick question came in about a copy of the presentation. So yeah, I can definitely send out the slides, but also we are recording this session, so there will be a recording available so you can review the whole thing. All right, so let's take a look at some of the communication. And first, let's look at internal communication with your team. I mean, obviously, it's much easier to communicate when you're in one office and sharing a desk with one another. But how do we communicate when we're all sitting at our houses? What are some things that we can do to streamline the communication and make it better? So Microsoft Teams is one of the tools, and this is the tool that we use internally for our team communication. What I really like about this is it combines messaging platform and conferencing, audio video conferencing as part of it, which is, it's different than all the other tools. Like, for example, it's basically, think of it as Slack and Zoom combined together. Another good thing about it is that it's fully integrated with Microsoft Office 365. So if you are a part of the Microsoft universe, this would be a the experience is really familiar and also easy to integrate with all your other Microsoft tools like Office, OneDrive, and SharePoint. So usually when we set this up, we suggest creating teams inside of this application, and those teams can be based on project or department, depending on how big your firm is, and if you even have, if you have departments identified, you'd probably want to create additional teams for each one of those individual departments. Once you have that set up, it makes it easier to, to communicate inside the teams. So all the project communication can just go into that project team. All the departmental communication can go into that department team. It's very easy to search. You can put files into it. You can even forward emails. So if you're communicating internally on the project using Microsoft Teams and then communicating with your clients using email, you can then forward that email into your team so that it stays there and it's always searchable. It has a cool mention feature, which I really like. So inside a team stream, you can have so many messages, and not always people that are part of that team may not always see the message that relates to them. So if you mention them in a message, they get a separate notification that they were mentioned, and they're more likely to pay attention to that message. So if you're trying to ask somebody for a status, it's good to mention them. That way you probably get a reply faster. And then it's accessible across all the devices, so you can either use it from your desktop PC, you can use it from any browser, and you can also use it from your mobile devices, and kind of looks a lot like a text messaging app on the mobile. Any questions on Microsoft Teams? Okay, so I see Ring Central being implemented. Is that implemented for full collaboration or just the meeting portion? Great, yeah, Ring Central is also one of the solutions that's pretty good. And in fact, we're using Ring Central Meeting right now for this conference. So yeah, great. How's that working out for you? All right, so far so good, great. Yeah, that's good to hear. We're also a Ring Central partner as well, so if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to kind of take that offline and answer them for you, unless you already got everything figured out. So the next tool we'll talk about is Slack. So, I mean, if you're not on Microsoft Teams, most likely you're on Slack, right? So it's two competing platforms, and what we find is people that are in the Microsoft universe prefer Microsoft Teams. People that are in the Google universe like to use Slack. I don't know why. Personally, to me, both are very similar tools, provide similar options. It just, it's a matter of preference, I guess, for whoever is the user of the application. But it's very similar to Teams. It does not have the video component built into it, or the conferencing component built into it, but it does integrate with other conference solutions like Zoom and GoToMeeting and even Microsoft Teams, actually. So you can utilize the integrations that are built into it to have the conferencing component. Again, very similar. You can create channels based on projects or departments, and you can communicate inside those channels just as effectively as you would in Microsoft Teams. I mean, the biggest thing about both of these is trying to eliminate email as the main point of communication, especially internally, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm not that great. I'm not that great about email being my primary communication tool. It's just a lot of wasted time when you're trying to search for content. Um, a lot of people get copied on things that they don't need to be part of, and just general email. Email eventually needs to be replaced as a communication tool, especially internal. So, any questions on Slack? Okay, so these were tools for internal communication. Now we can look at some things for external. And mostly when people ask us about communicating with their clients, we talk about, again, video conferencing solutions like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, Skype, again, Ring Central, and you name it, right? So the biggest thing you want to do is when you're talking to your clients is, I think, having a video presence is good because then you can see each other's you know, facial expressions and cues, so it's easier to adjust your presentation, and it's easier to understand what others are saying. Additionally, you want to share your screen if you're if you're walking through something that requires visual. So if it's a rendering, or if it's if it's a schematic design or anything like that that you want to show to your client, you want to be able to share your screen. You can also use whiteboard functions of these tools to do real-time annotations and collaboration with clients. So if there's any changes that they may be asking for, then you can easily annotate those using the whiteboard tool and show them that that you're making those changes real time. And then lastly, make sure you record those meetings because it's easier then for you to go back and you can re-listen and see if you missed anything. It makes it easy to take notes, at least in my opinion, where instead of kind of scribbling down and not really listening to what the client is saying, you just record everything and then re-listen to it and have all your notes in there that way. Any questions on this? Any questions? Yes, definitely ask for permission to record. That is a good point. And also, again, when I say record, I don't mean to record in terms of kind of that you can go back to that later in case something comes up, although that's a good practice as well, but just for taking your own notes, right, and remembering what you've talked about. So any questions on the communication software in general, Microsoft Teams, Slack, and then client communication? Okay, I'm gonna move on to the cybersecurity refocus. And the reason I say refocus is that I feel that when I'm at home, well, maybe not me personally, but even my family, they're not as security aware, more relaxed, I would say. So it's good to remind ourselves that even though we're working from home, we still need to be mindful of all these security risks and maybe some additional things. So as we talked about, if we're using VPN, for example, there's an additional security risk that your home computer may infect your entire office network if your home computer doesn't have all the security tools installed. But also what we have to think about is that in the last couple of months, there's been a huge rise in phishing scams, and especially scams around, government provided support programs for businesses, where people send out scam emails, phishing emails. So, hey, apply for the PPP loan now, and they send you a link, and you click on it, and it's a virus, or they're asking you for all the personal information, trying to pretend that they're a bank. So we really have to start paying more attention to the emails. And the rule of thumb is if you're not expecting this email, you should probably not open it, right? And I understand sometimes it's tough, right? Because we're always expecting emails from prospective clients for prospective projects and things like that. But we want to really be careful when reviewing and opening those emails. So then the next topic I want to cover is something that's a recent phenomenon, and it's called Zoom bombing. It's basically, people have figured out now that everybody's using Zoom or similar software, that they can jump in on the meeting by just simply generating a meeting ID, right? So what happens with Zoom and all the other conference softwares, they give you a meeting ID, which is usually a 9 or 10 character number. So that number can be generated by using some basic software, which there's a lot of those that are out there now. And people can just jump on to other people's meetings randomly, or it could be targeted attacks. And when they jump on, they can either listen in to the conversation, kind of the conversation we're having now, or they can, disrupt the meeting, yell out racial slurs, and do other bad things, just to disrupt the meeting, which is, it may be okay if you're just having a conversation with a friend, but if you're having an internal company meeting and you're discussing some sensitive stuff, it's definitely something that you need to think about. So some of the things that we can do there is basically not use your personal meeting ID for all of your meetings, but try to generate random meeting IDs for the more sensitive meetings. That would be one. And also use passwords to protect the more sensitive internal meetings. So if you're having a partner meeting, or if you're having a financial discussion of some sort, use a password to protect those meetings. And then if you're meeting with a client and you're worried that somebody may Zoom bomb you and disrupt your presentation, you probably want to have a password generated for that as well. And so, any questions on those? Oh, I got a question here. So AVG provides secure access to connecting. So yeah, AVG is a pretty good tool. Again, depends on free versus paid version. And not that I want you guys to spend extra money, but you have to understand that anything that's provided free may not have the full options available, and also may not have the full privacy options available, right? The reason Google provides Gmail to everybody, and so the reason Microsoft had Hotmail, is because they want to mine all that data. So you want to make sure that if it's, if you're using a tool for business, you're at least reviewing everything that you sign up for if it's free. And if it's a paid service, you're a lot better in terms of privacy and security. Okay, so question about complex passwords. So yeah, I was gonna get into that. So let's just go into that now. So complex passwords, it used to be that 8 characters and then a number and a capital and a special character were good enough. Right now, these standards change all the time. I can tell you what I'm doing for our best practices internally, and then I can tell you what the general consensus is for right now, at least. So what we're doing internally is we're actually using a password keeper tool called LastPass. You can do 1Password or other password keepers to generate and store these passwords. And we generate complex passwords of 20 characters or more, including 1 number, 1 capital, and 1 special character. So that's what we're doing internally. But I mean, kind of the consensus best practice right now is 12 characters or more, including a number, capital letter, and a special character. So again, to follow on to this recommendation, I would also say try to use a password electronic password vault to like 1Password or LastPass or Dashlane, so that you can store those passwords securely, and you don't have to remember them because it automatically either fills it out for you, or you can just copy and paste that out. Good question. All right, so follow on to these kind of cybersecurity best practices is, again, remember that we shouldn't be opening emails if you're not expecting them, or if you are opening that, be very careful, especially if it has a link or a button to click. Make sure that you can hover over that link or button and see that it points exactly at where the description points, right? So sometimes you can hover over and there's like a link that 150 characters long, full of gibberish. That's probably a bad link. Keep home and office computers up to date. So that means make sure that you're installing either Windows or Mac OS updates on your computers all the time. You can set it for automatic updating, although sometimes it doesn't update. Sometimes it updates at a bad time, especially when you're trying to do work and the computer automatically reboots for you. So you may want to be a little more intentional on that and manually update it at the time that you want it. Yeah, so Mike just sent a note that we're going over. So I'm gonna, Mike, should we pause or should we continue? I guess that would be my question.
Well, we were supposed to end it at 1. If people want to stay on, that's perfectly fine. But I really want to make sure that everyone knows that this is being recorded and that you will have access to the video after the fact. And that we'll be following this up with more advanced discussions that are pertain to the data we find out in regard to your individual needs and the questions you asked. So feel free to keep listening.
Okay, so I'm going to continue with this. So make sure your home computers and your office computers are up to date. Make sure your security software is up to date. Make sure you're using not just the basic free versions of antivirus software, but for your business, you're using some sort of a centrally managed paid version. And then try to use two-factor authentication on as many things as possible. I know it can be a hustle sometimes, but it really is made to keep things secure. And as long as you have your phone with you, you'll be able to have access and the bad guys won't. And the reason I say that is once I forgot my phone, and that was really bad because I had to go home and get it because I couldn't log into anything. So yeah, just a quick story on two-factor authentication and secure access. All right, so we've kind of covered most of the technical stuff. I also wanted to do a little bit, touch a little bit on just what are some additional challenges with remote work that we're all facing as business owners, including myself, and I'm sure you guys are as well, and also what your employees might be facing. So some common challenges that we all face is that we don't have any face-to-face supervision. So we really don't know if somebody is doing what we ask them to do. And we may not always have the up-to-date information on what people are doing. So I think it's really good to use a tool like Slack or Teams to get more instant communication and that information. Social isolation is another big one. Some people are stuck at home and really feel like they don't have anybody to talk to about the work that they need to do. They may not be able to find all the right information that they used to when they were in the office, whether it's books or other materials that are not electronic. And then home distractions is another big one, especially I know myself, right now I have 5 members of my family at home. My 2 kids, my wife, and our other relative that lives with us. We're all at home, and we're all trying to work from home. My kids are trying to study. We're trying to homeschool them. So there's a lot of distractions and a lot of things that are happening that I really can't control, and I just have to kind of deal with that. And we have to understand that that could be the case for our employees as well. So I got another question here about the VPN. So again, that question about Sonic and the VPN. So could you give me more detail or what you were trying to do, or maybe we can take this offline. I mean, it's up to you, but a VPN would be required for you to access your office, because otherwise you'll be able to connect to your office. But if you're just doing, if you're just trying to do VPN for secure web access, just to access the internet, then it's probably, I don't think it's really required since you are on a fiber network. Now, if you're in a public wireless location, you do want to have VPN for browsing, especially if you're doing any banking from that location, like a coffee shop or something else. Can I recommend a good malware scanner? Yeah, a free one would be Malwarebytes. And again, that's good to use for one-time scanning as a free tool. AVG free is also pretty good, again, for one-time scanning. But if you're looking for more kind of real-time protection, not just a single scan, then you'd have to pay for their paid service. We use Webroot as our antivirus, anti-malware software, very light in terms of the installation. And we've been using it for the last 7 years, and so far so good. So I can definitely recommend that one. It's not free, but I think it's $27 a year, something like that. And we can talk more about that if you want. Okay, so I hope I answered the Sonic question. And again, I'll have my email in one of the last slides. You guys can send me an email if you want, and I'll answer in more detail. Moving on to the next slide here is, so now that we've looked at some challenges, what are some tips that we can do that we can use to be more effective as leaders in working remotely? So one would be try to communicate much more than you have been in the past, and basically over communicate. One thing I do when I assign a task to one of my people, especially if they haven't done that task before, is I create a short video kind of walking them through the task and the expected result that they would get in a task. That way they can follow the video and see what the result should be, and hopefully replicate everything, because we don't get a chance to stand over their shoulder or walk by and see if things go in the wrong direction. So having that communication with as much detail as possible, as many steps as possible for them to complete the work properly, is for your benefit, and also keeps your employees sane as well. Okay, next, and I think there's another question that came in, so I'll ask that. I'll read that in a bit once we're finished with the slide. Another thing is basically try to not manage to a time, but manage to a result, as we talked about, and I think that kind of covers some of this question as well. As we talked about, there are a lot of distractions that are happening in people's homes, and they may not be able to do something at the on your schedule, but they may then, unless it has a specific deadline, they can then do it later. For example, I found that I help my kids study at home you know, through the morning, and then I'm more effective when I'm working from 11 o'clock to about 7 p.m. As opposed to before when, you know, a 9 to 5 was my most effective. So some of your employees may not be as effective. So you want to assign them tasks that they can deliver, but look, you know, look for the result, not necessarily the amount of work that they do, right? So um, as long as the work is getting done, we should be okay and trust our employees to manage their own time. Show empathy is another one. Is basically, again, try to understand everybody's situation at home and try um, to help them in any way you can, and just you know, try to be supportive of all of your employees, because just, you know, just like everybody's going through a tough time right now, so it's us and all of our team members as well. And then be intentional about communication. So we have a standing meeting every morning. Well, standing. It's basically a Zoom meeting every morning where we go through the, you know, through the things that we plan to do for the day. So everybody kind of talks about 3 things they plan to accomplish in a day. And then we also have scheduled check-ins into the Microsoft Teams, you know, every 2 hours. I ask them to just send in a quick 1-sentence status of where they at. So that way I have access to that information. And also if, you know, if I need some information, I can then follow up with them on that, right? And then give some additional tips and help that I can give them. Any questions on this? So I guess the question is, hourly employees should function or bill clients by the hour, but then there's distractions. Yeah. So again, for us, and we're not an architecture firm, but we are, you know, professional services firm. So we do, for some of the projects, we bill by the hour. I find that basically just saying, look, you know, there is a task, and this task should take X amount of hours. And basically, when the task gets completed, we just bill for that amount of time. I think that's what we have to do right now, whether it takes longer or less. We have to just say, if the result is delivered, this is the X amount of time that we're billing for it. Any more questions on this? Okay, so some quick tips here on productivity, and this could be your own productivity, or maybe can help your employees as well. And this is basically make sure that you start every morning with a routine, just as you would if you were going to the office. So even though you know, your office may be on a couch or a kitchen table, you know, you still try to do the same things that you would do when you go to the office. So I get up in the morning, I do some exercise, you know, take a shower, get dressed, go upstairs, make myself breakfast, cup of coffee, and then kind of just walk to the office, which is basically a few feet from my kitchen table. All right, so it looks like we may need to wrap up, and I think this was the last slide on productivity. So real quick, morning routine, workspace, make sure you have your workspace that, you know, is set up for work and doesn't have a lot of clutter and distractions that can distract you. Focus is, again, try to plan out your day and focus on those things that you wanted to accomplish. And then take health breaks, right? So every couple hours I would take, you know, 20-30 minutes to either walk or do an exercise or meditate. So just try to keep as healthy as possible, both mentally and physically. And we'll send these out as well, but these are basically some software tools, response to COVID-19. They're, you know, Autodesk, Graphisoft, Bluebeam, Monograph, and PQE Core are giving some extended trials and extended free tools. So I will send that out after the meeting. and then some additional resources here, which I'll also send out as well. So as I mentioned, here's my contact information. If you guys have any additional questions that we didn't cover here, I know we had a lot of specific questions that I tried to address, but it's not always easy to kind of stay generic enough so that everybody can participate, but also specific enough to where I can answer individual questions. So hopefully you guys can either give me a call or send me an email, and I can address individual questions as well.
And Boris, I wanted to put up this last poll as well to see if people would be interested in a more advanced webinar, more focused webinar. And I'll let everybody know that since we have your contact information, we will be sending out the slides. There'll be a web page with all the links on it that you can get to on the AIA site. And of course, that will also include the information so that you can speak directly with Boris with any specific information or questions. And a lot of that will help inform whether we do more of these webinars and sort of drill down into topics that could be more helpful to listeners. Thank you so much for attending our conference today or our webinar today. And again, everybody stay safe. I'm going to close the poll right now. And we see that about 70% of respondents thought that it would be useful having an advanced workshop. So we will probably put that together in the next week or so and look for some feedback from you all in regard to the content that would be the most valuable for your businesses. Again, thanks to everybody for attending, and have a healthy day.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Talk to you later.